So this is my Christian testimony. So it's an explanation, an account of how I became a Christian. So the story starts off in my childhood. From a very early age as a kid, I was always thinking, like, what is this? What is this all for? You know, this beautiful world that we have around us. You know, trees and the sky and the sea and like, us animals. Like, why are we here? You know, I used to think about that. I know it sounds pretentious, but it's actually true. From a very, very early age, I used to sort of wonder about this. Like, what are we here for? Who am I? What am I supposed to do with my life? The next thing that I would say as well about my childhood, sort of growing up, was my dad. So his mother was a Christian, a pretty good person by all accounts. My dad used to talk about her taking food to people on her street who were either ill or had fallen on hard times. And you know, before I used to go to bed as a kid, he'd always say "God bless" to me, and I always used to say "God bless" back to him. And you know, it's just two words, isn't it? But I think it's two very powerful words because you know you're asking God, our Father, to bless you. And what I can say so far in my life is that you know, I do feel as if I have been blessed by God, and you know, saying "God bless." Yeah, I think that began my relationship, I guess, with God. Pretty shortly after that, or around the same time, I definitely was kind of aware of, you know, again from quite a young age, the difference between right and wrong. You know, good things would strike a chord with me. You know, you would feel something moving inside you. You know, when somebody did something good to you, or you maybe saw somebody doing good to others, and likewise when you saw people behaving badly, doing nasty, not good things, not nice things, then again you would feel something inside you that this was no voices or anything, but just a feeling that this is bad vibes. You know, so that was I guess that was where it all began. The next thing that happened was that I went to school like everybody else. Primary school, there wasn't much Christianity going on there, but at secondary school I went to a state comprehensive, and we did RE there, religious education it was called. And back then, so this is like mid to late 70s, you know, down the school, this was like leading up towards GCSE, we were taught by this Jewish guy. And looking back on it now, he never taught us anything about Jesus, but he did tell us all about these amazing Old Testament stories, you know, from the book of Daniel, for example. And I don't think he was he was a bit weird as a guy, but he did tell these Bible stories really, really well. At the time, I remember I was sat next to this atheist guy. He's you know, become a GP. You know, like a lot of these you know, atheist guys, he's you know, hardcore socialist, and you know, sees the government as being like a god. And anyway, so he would be constantly belittling this guy. But anyway, when I started to read the Bible again later on in my life, these stories, I kind of remembered them as I was reading them. You know, I was thinking back to my RE lessons at school when I was reading the Old Testament. So I went to university, studied economics. When I left, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I tried out a few things, decided I was going to be a teacher, and I had a few months to kill. So I decided to go to Israel on a kibbutz. And one night, I was with this girlfriend, and we were on the top of a youth hostel, not far from Damascus Gate, inside the old city in Jerusalem. And you know, something very, 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 very extraordinary happened, and that was, it was like twilight, So I don't know, 7 o'clock, because it goes quite dark early in Jerusalem. And basically this guy approaches me, and he looks exactly like Jesus, and starts speaking to me. And I don't know, he had like an aura. He had an aura. When I remember now in my mind's eye, sort of casting my eye on this guy as he approached. Anyway, he talked about how the world basically is Satan's place, and Satan's allowed to test us. And what we're here for is, to love one another. And basically, he was, I don't know, I just sensed, like, in a word, I just sensed an amazing feeling of love emanating from this guy. And we had a very, very nice conversation. And again, I guess I was coming out with a lot of the things that I'd been, taught by my dad in particular, which probably came from his mother, which is, like the golden rule, do unto others as you would like to be done to yourself. So I was talking, it was very, very nice conversation, but it was kind of, he looked like Jesus, and it was a very, 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 very interesting moment, basically, that made me think quite a lot about God and Jesus Christ. So then, in my 20s, I decided to become a teacher, and after probably about 10 years into my teaching career, I got a job as head of department at a school that was nominally a Church of England school. So I used to go to the chapel. They used to have chapel services every Friday, so I used to go along to those. The school had a chaplain, and if I'm being honest, I didn't really, he was one of these ones where he was all dressed up in the fancy clothes, and his Bible teaching, I don't know if there was any. I can't really remember much about what he said, apart from the fact that it wasn't particularly, it didn't strike any chords with me. It wasn't something that kept my attention, put it that way. Then moved to Finland, became a dad, and then came back. The job that I came back to the UK, I got a job at another Church of England school. And the first guy, there was two chaplains whilst I was there. The first one was a guy called Colin, really nice guy. And he did try to, I think he was pretty good. Again, it was all the formality of the kind of Church of England, the fancy clothes, the trippage, with all fancy ornamentation and stuff like that. Then he left, and we had another chaplain come in, and he was more modern, but still wore all the fancy clothes and everything. And I guess his one was basically his message was, Jesus loves you, and it was like a blank check, really. You didn't really have to offer much back in return. There was not much reference to the Bible, to be honest. There might be a tiny verse at the beginning of each session, but then, I don't know, I remember him putting on sunglasses and there was all sorts of, he'd bring kids out to the front and do, act out scenes or something like that. So it was all a bit, I don't know. Again, it didn't really strike a massive chord with me, if I'm being honest. Even though I liked the guy, but it didn't really bring, it didn't really resonate with me. In fact, all the fancy clothes and the ceremonial aspects of things, it didn't float my boat. There was something that was striking a chord in me, that this didn't quite feel right, Right, so far you're probably thinking, well, this guy doesn't sound like much of a Christian, he wasn't going to church and all of that. And, maybe up until this point in my life, apart from, I think maybe the Holy Spirit had entered me, when I was a child, when I was saying God bless to my dad and he was saying God bless to me. Because I think from a very early age, I also realised that I wasn't perfect. I knew the difference between good and wrong, right and wrong, and I knew I wasn't perfect. I knew I was in need of a saviour. Anyway, so I'm probably by this stage, what am I? I'm probably in my mid-40s. It's Easter time, and I'm off to Finland. At this stage, I'm still living in England, but I'm married to my Finnish wife, and we're going over to see her parents. So, and I didn't speak Finnish at this stage, so I always had to take loads and loads of reading material with me, because I knew that my wife and my son also, they were just going to be talking in Finnish all the time to my father and mother-in-law. I didn't mind that at all, because they didn't speak English, and it was my fault at that stage that I didn't speak Finnish. I was just too idle, basically. Anyway, so was I at the airport? I don't think I actually bought the Bible at the airport. I bought it, yes, I remember now. I bought it from Waterstones in Guildford. So I went upstairs, and I bought a Good News Bible. So I thought to myself, I've never read the Bible. This is the best-selling book in human history. I've read loads and loads and loads of books, but I've never read the Bible. It's time for me to read it myself. So I bought it. I probably bought it about a week or two before we flew off to Finland, and I'd not opened it until we arrived. So I remember, reading it. It's just the New Testament, and I started off with the book of Matthew, read it in order, and it blew me away. It absolutely blew me away. And it was just striking chords with me all over the place. It was the most captivating thing I've ever read, and still have read in my life. And the other thing that's kind of struck me was that this had absolutely nothing to do, with maybe the exception of this guy, Colin, with the so-called Christian teaching that I'd been encountering at Church of England schools. There seemed to be a huge difference between, or there was a huge difference between what was in the Bible and what was being taught to kids in a Church of England school. So for example, there was no, you read in any of the four Gospels, there was no sort of stuff about having to wear, fancy clothes, or all sorts of man-made ceremonies. And you read it, and Jesus, he just seemed like he didn't stand on ceremony, did he? And he spoke the truth to people. When you actually read the Bible yourself, it's like, wow, this bloke didn't take any prisoners. He really, he spoke the truth, and he certainly didn't hold back too. He was a straight talker. And the other thing that made me think, about how different it was from the church was how demanding Jesus was of his followers. He was the God-man, God in a human form, and he was sent to earth to put us on the right path, as an exemplar for us to try to follow, for us to try to emulate. And then the other thing that you read in the Bible that's not in Church of England services is hell. Jesus is in the Bible. Jesus is pretty clear. And the other thing that I liked about it was, when you read the four Gospels, they all it's the same story told by four different people. So it all collaborates. That's what I'm talking about. All the stories, they kind of match up with each other. They reinforce each other. So Jesus is warning people, you've got to get your acts together. Otherwise you're going to hell. which is just something that was not talked about in Church of England services to kids. They did not talk about hell. They also in the Bible, Jesus there's reference to Jesus, battling the devil in the desert, where Jesus fasts for 40 days and 40 nights, and the devil offers him the world in return for Jesus, worshipping him. So there was really, really, really important elements of the Bible are just not taught in the Church of England, and which, again, it just struck me. It was mind-blowing, basically, how different the Bible was to the Church of England. And I think I've done another video before about this, and it would be like feeding a kid like something horrible like prunes or something, and telling them that they were eating strawberries, and then afterwards asking the kid, do you like strawberries? Of course they're not going to say they like strawberries, because you've been lying and feeding them prunes, in syrup and stuff. Horrible. So I guess what I'm saying here is that I have a lot of sympathy with people who say that they don't like the church. And this was what let's call him who he probably was, Jesus. This is what, my encounter with Jesus when I was on the rooftop in the old city of Jerusalem. He said that organised religion was the work of the devil. And I firmly believe that is the case. And I understand how people have been turned off by the Church of England, let alone the Catholic Church, because they're not actually teaching Christianity. They're teaching something else that isn't Christianity. Another thing that I noticed from reading the Bible that was very, very different from the Church of England services, the chapel services that I attended whilst I was at school, was that there was no reference to end times. That the Bible is pretty clear on this, is that Jesus Christ returns, and basically not everybody enters the kingdom of heaven. When you read the Bible, it's pretty clear. We are held to account for our actions, and we're expected to, well, at the very least, uphold the golden rule. Do unto others as would you like to be done to yourself. So towards the end of my time at this school, I remember teaching. As I say, I was an economics teacher. I remember one day, just by accident, I was looking at, I think it was on, it was a map basically of Africa, where the countries were shown according to their Human Development Index, which is basically a measurement of the quality of life in a country. It's like an average of three things: per capita income, life expectancy, and infant mortality. Anyway, this green country, leapt out, and green was at the highest end of the HDI shown on this map. So the country was Libya. So I started to think about Libya, and I did a little bit of research about why the quality of life was particularly high in Libya. So I found out some interesting stuff about it. And I decided I talked to the head about it. She was always, if you talk to her about things like this, she was always, she was quite receptive. I think I must have talked to her about it at lunchtime once. Anyway, she asked me to do this whole school assembly, and about Libya. And it was at the time when Colonel Gaddafi was being regime changed by NATO, basically. So a lot of the things that I was going to talk about were going to be quite spicy, basically, because obviously what was happening was that America, Britain, and its kind of NATO partners, they wanted Libya's oil, and Colonel Gaddafi was using Libya's oil money to promote economic development in his own country. Maybe I'll actually do a video on that separate topic. But anyway, it's quite interesting. As a teacher, you can often people often think, oh, you must be quite gregarious and all of that. But no, there must have been, the whole school assembly was about 850 people, and you were also doing the assembly in front of all of your colleagues and stuff. So it was quite nerve-wracking. And when I was preparing this, it was on a Sunday evening, and I went to bed feeling sort of still quite nervous, like why did I volunteer to do this, But I just knew that I had to speak the truth. So I prayed to God. I said, God, can you help me with this? And this is the first time that this has ever happened to me. Was I don't hear voices in my head. This is the only time. Well, this has been 2 times actually, but this was the first time it happened. God basically talked to me. He said, "Don't worry, I'll speak the words for you." No word of a lie. And it kind of like, when I remember like lying in my bed when those words like bammed into my head, and I was actually really shocked, And of course the presentation went really, really well. So I guess another thing as well was when Divock 91 started in March 2020, and pretty soon when this kind of fiasco started, and they started talking about the Britney Spears and the boosters injections, your mind like flashes back to chapter 13 in the book of Revelation about the mark of the beast. So there's been lots of things that have been happening that in end times that have already happened. So the Bible talks about massive inflation, that a day's wages was just enough to buy a loaf of bread, something like that. I'll actually put in the quote from the Bible now. And then obviously that the Bible references the beast system, that you have to have a mark on either your left, on your right hand, or on your forehead to buy or sell, which was very, very close to what the Nazi passports were. It wasn't the mark of the beast, but it was a forerunner to it. I guess the other thing as well was that so much of the world and what we've been told about history, the last few years, it's all basically come out in the wash, that a lot of it is a load of nonsense. So that again encouraged me to think a little bit more about evolution. No, I never really believed in evolution anyway. Imagine that all of this that you're seeing now, the sand, the sea, the sky, the trees, all of this was an accident, and there was a bang somewhere, and we don't know what went bang, or we don't know what created the thing that went bang, but then all of this has just been randomly created, apart from those blue spherical things which were designed by man, but everything else was designed by nobody. So all of that, I kind of realized, it's just complete. When you think about the theory of evolution, it's just such nonsense that we were human beings evolved from primeval sludge, and then we became tadpoles, and then we kind of evolved into dinosaurs, and then we became a donkey, and then we became a human. But it's just complete nonsense. So again, for me, that strengthened my faith in God. I then, when I was in Finland, I started to read deeper into the New Testament, starting off from the book of Acts, going through until First and Second Thessalonians is definitely worth a read in terms of its description of the lead up towards end times and the rapture of the church. So that's basically how I became a Christian. Over the last 2-3 years, it's undeniable that good and evil exists. It's undeniable that somebody created all of this. God created this. Our Father who art in heaven, he created it. So, you know, you then read deeper into the Bible and you can see end times coming. And it's really important that you don't end up suffering this great tribulation period that's coming, where Satan gets 7 years to rule over mankind. You know, if you're not a saved Christian and you have to go through the great tribulation period, so you're going to face this great tribulation period, which I wouldn't wish on anybody. In fact, I probably will do a separate video about what happens in the great tribulation period. But you know, safe to say that if I was, you know, in your position, I don't know, maybe for those people who are atheists or like non-believers, is please don't judge Christianity according to Justin Welby, or, you know, the Pope who does them, like, you know, satanic devil horns, and as it works from a hole that's looks like a serpent's head and stuff like that. What I would recommend, maybe just do it initially, you know, as an intellectual exercise. Read, get yourself. I know people will say King James Bible. Yes, you know, that's definitely the best version of the Bible. But if you're coming to Christianity, you know, for the first time and you've never read the Bible before, you know, it might be worth your while to get hold of a Good News version, which is written in a more accessible form of English. And then, you know, I'm sure once you've read the Good News, a Gospel in the Good News version, you'll migrate over to the King James version. So read it for yourself and make your own mind up. And don't be influenced by, as I say, the Pope, or, you know, these people who, it's like Jesus said it, didn't he? In his times, he called the religious leaders of his day, you know, the Pharisees, he called them liars and hypocrites. And yeah, and I think what I would say is that this guy that I met on the rooftop in Jerusalem, who said organised religion is the work of the devil, is spot on. So yeah, I'm waffling a little bit here again, but my main message to you is read one of the Gospels of the New Testament from a Good News Bible if you're not already a Christian, and I'm sure it will strike a chord with you. And yeah, and that's all I'm going to say today. So yeah, God bless.